Hi guys, I'm John Fitzgerald and welcome to Custodian TV. You know, I always tell you that the greatest property story in the world is McDonald's. The greatest property story, and almost an accidental property story, because Ray Kroc bought his first store when he was 56 years of age. An incredible story. I've got with me now an icon of McDonald's, of property, of Australian business, Pete Ritchie, who set up and ran and built over 500, bought over 500 stores in Australia from 1969 on. Welcome on, Pete.
Thanks, John.
Now, Pete's a great story for a lot of reasons, but from my perspective, he's a great story because he was there at the beginning, and he tells a great story about how McDonald's wasn't so successful at the start. Tell me about that.
In Australia?
Yeah,
in the US too, actually, yeah. No, I make the point that there ain't no such thing as instant success.
Great
point.
point.
And both in the US and in Australia, we battled. We really had to work hard and go through hard times. I think beneficially, you come out of those things much stronger than you went into them. But I spent 7 years here in Australia before I made a profit. That sort of shocks people most of the time when I tell it. But it was a fact. And Ray Kroc opened his first store in 1955 in Chicago, a suburb of Chicago. And his CFO told me he was broke in 1961. So 6 years later, he was insolvent. So that's the sort of instant success that McDonald's actually had.
Yeah, so not so much instant success. But over the years, they call McDonald's the greatest property company in the world of the last 50 years. Why is that? What's the secret there?
Well, we don't like McDonald's being referred to as a property company because our real strength is making hamburgers. And the truth is...
How many hamburgers do I see on the balance sheet, though?
Yeah, well, actually, you don't see a lot of property on the balance sheet either. It's all underlying because we don't revalue, so...
Wow.
So,
it must be worth billions.
Yeah. And that's the analysts, of course, do that mathematics. But in McDonald's, it's just one of our fundamental bases upon which we sell our hamburgers. If we weren't selling hamburgers, we wouldn't be making profit, so we'd be out of business. But what your point you're making is that we are one of the world's biggest property owners. And when I started in Australia, I took a even perhaps more aggressive stance than that, because I said to them, the Yanks, we have to own in Australia. I'm not going to work for the landlord, because you don't get a commercial lease in Australia without a very, very tough escalation clause in it. And so I said, we've got to own. And that was my attitude right from the outset, and it's now paying off in spades.
And I know the story that you bought a lot in downturns. You really did roll up your sleeves when things were tough and bought. What was the premise of that?
Well, I just saw it as an opportunity. People were undervaluing real estate for a brief window, and I knew it wouldn't go on because I knew things were cyclical. So I always said, took my heart in my mouth a little bit, I got to say, because you have to take some chances, because there are people who are saying to you, oh, this is the end, it's not going to come back from this one. And I've heard that so many times, but which makes you think. But with me, it just made me think, Jesus, this is a bigger opportunity, I'm going to get in and really accelerate our rate of growth in down times, and that's what I did.
Amazing. And an amazing story because it's a property story with income. So Pete worked on the income, worked on the property, and that's what made him successful. Inflation of property, and you tell a great story about when you're sitting around with the Reserve Bank. I need to get that story out of you, Pete.
Well, that's a personal story, yeah. I was having a smallish lunch with Glenn Stevens, the Governor of the Reserve Bank, in the last couple of years. And it was a small group, and he was railing a little bit, as he has done publicly. I mean, I'm not telling anything
True.
out of school here. He's got this obsession about property not being a really good investment, and he was railing about he can't understand Australians' preoccupation with property. So when it came to question time, I just said across the table to him, Glenn, I'd like to tell you a personal story. I bought my first house in Sydney in 1969 and I paid $16,000 for it. I still own it, and it's now worth $1.6 million. I said, what do you need me to explain?
I often say, there's two types of people in this world. Some people who get property and some people who don't. If you don't get property, you're just not going to get it. McDonald's get property. And I first dealt with McDonald's back in the 1980s myself, and I learned their secrets. And their secrets was the land content, build alone, stand alone, but being able to morph and change. And then to hybrate their income and increase their income and use it to duplicate. Success is just repetition. There's no better at repetition than McDonald's, not only for the consistency you get in the stores, but also the consistency of their property and their expansion. Success is just repetition. 7 Steps, the custodian program, is essentially just duplicating that repetition into a residential portfolio. Thanks for listening to me. And Pete, thanks for being a guest on Custodian TV. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, John. I've enjoyed it.
Cheers.
Bye.